Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast where we explore all things reproductive health, rights, and justice. I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and I'll be helping you stay informed around issues like birth control, abortion, sex education, and LGBTQ issues, and much, much more. Giving you the tools you need to take action and fight back. Okay, let's dive in. Everybody, I hope you all are doing well. Welcome to rePROs Fight Back from my closet. So I'm still at home, clearly, as we all should be. Everyone who is able to. I am recording from home in my closet. So, like maybe a month ago, there were this picture going around of Ira Glass recording his podcast in his closet, and he's like in a full suit and looking very dapper, recording his episode. I'm just like that, basically, except I am wearing fleece-lined yoga pants and a flannel. So, basically exactly the same thing. Also, I have cats. So I think I mentioned this last time, and we got very lucky that they decided to behave themselves while I was recording. We'll see if we get lucky 2 weeks in a row. They often like to sit and talk to me, so we shall see what happens. But just, bear in mind, we have to deal with that. They have really been enjoying having me home 24/7 at their beck and call. And they've also really been enjoying doing Zoom calls. So everybody on my work meetings that have been Zoom meetings, both of my cats have made at least an appearance in every call I have been on. But Luna has really tried to get as much FaceTime on Zoom as humanly possible, and she will just sit there and stare at me or stare at the camera for like most of a call. So that's been fun. Everybody is getting to deal with Luna, and it's just, you can only do so much. You can push her away once or twice, but she's going to keep coming back. She also really enjoys laying on my notebooks while I'm taking notes on those calls, so that's also really fun. So it's been an adventure in working from home. I've also been really enjoying watching the Bon Appetit test kitchen videos. They're like my happy place, and I can just like sit and watch them for a really long time. It's been fun. But that also makes me think of, I did start my sourdough, and it was a success. I didn't make the bread yet. I did the starter from scratch, and it's alive and healthy. And right now it's in my refrigerator chilling. I will make sourdough bread soon. I just am waiting for a couple of things to come. One of those being more flour. Don't quite have enough flour, or at least the kinds I need to make the sourdough bread. So I'm waiting on that. And then I will have fresh sourdough, and I'm so excited. Let's see, what else have I been doing? Ooh, I found that Amazon Prime has Unsolved Mysteries on it. And y'all, I remember back in the day watching Unsolved Mysteries with my college roommate back when we were in the dorms. It came on in reruns at 11 o'clock at night. So it would be like one of those things we would like turn it on right before we went to bed and would watch Unsolved Mysteries. So I am feeling very nostalgic and thinking of my older roommate Hoda and watching Unsolved Mysteries right now and watching it in all of its fabulous 80s glory. It's making me very happy. Let's see, what else have I been doing? Oh, I have been taking advantage of, so my best friend lives in Colorado right now, and so we try and talk like once a month. We're busy. She travels a lot. I travel. So we don't always get a chance to talk and definitely not see each other as much as we used to. But we have definitely been taking advantage of being stuck at home and working from home to have a set weekly FaceTime chat. And it has been so nice to just take a break in the middle of the day and sit and catch up and hear about what the other one is doing and just get some extra FaceTime with somebody who is easy, right? Like we're just easy to talk to each other. It's really nice, and that has made being quarantined much easier. So I think that's kind of everything that's been going on around here. I'm still reading a lot. Please feel free to send any recommendations, movie or TV or books, and I will take advantage. And with that, we will turn to this week's episode, which I'm really excited about. There has been so much happening around abortion access during the pandemic. A lot of states are taking advantage of the pandemic to shut down access to abortion care. And so I could not think of two better people to talk to than the two amazing hosts of Boom Lawyered and writers for Rewire.News, Imani Gandy and Jessica Mason Pieklo, to talk to us about what is going on, what is happening in the states, and what is happening in the courts with all of these abortion bans. So with that, I will turn to my interview with Jess and Imani. Okay, so a quick note before we get to the interview. One of the pleasures of recording from home instead of the studio is having to deal with my cats, and y'all may be having to listen to them. But another one is my condo building is installing solar panels on our roof, which no big deal, right? Except I live on the top floor. So they're currently in the process of installing panels directly over my unit right now. So there may be a little bit of background noise. I moved into the quietest place I could find, which unfortunately is not my closet. So the sound may not be as good as it would normally be, but sorry, bear with me. We're doing what we can to make this work, and we'll try and edit out as much in post as we can, but you may just have to deal with a little bit of installation noise from my solar panels. So with that, now we will actually turn to the interview with Jess and Imani. Hi, Jess and Imani. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So when I did my intro, I talked about how people should know you from, one, your amazing writing at Rewire.News, but also your amazing podcast, Boom Lawyered. But I forgot to mention your brand new podcast, We'll Hear Arguments, which I loved. Do you want to take a second and talk about that?
Yes, after you.
Sure, yeah, thank you. We'll Hear Arguments is a new series that Rewire.News and Imani and I and our producer Mark Folletti have put out, and it is Mystery Science Theater 3000 meets abortion law oral arguments. And so we take a deep dive into the oral arguments of Roe versus Wade in season 1 and give it the Mystery Science Theater 3000 treatment. We go through the audio archive and we pull apart the arguments and from the state of Texas that Sarah Weddington made to challenge Texas's abortion ban, and then draw it into the present day arguments that we are having now over abortion bans, and so connect those dots. And it was a ton of fun to do. We're really looking forward to putting together a season 2, and you can find it where you get all of your podcasts. Imani, did I miss anything?
No, I think you nailed it. It seems like we recorded that podcast eons ago.
Like 5 lifetimes ago.
Yeah. But I would highly recommend it. We had so much fun doing it, and it's so relevant to what's going on right now with the incessant attempts by states to ban abortion, even in the face of a pandemic. So, yeah, go check it out, please.
I learned so much listening to it, and I really enjoyed it. It was wonderful. So thank you all for doing it.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for listening.
Okay, so now we have to turn to the clusterfuck of everything that is happening right now. And because there is so much happening, I think we need to make it clear. We're recording on the Friday before this comes out, which is April 17th at 3:00. So this is when everything is true as of, because it is moving very fast. So let's start maybe a little bit at the beginning and talk a little bit about what are states doing right now to try and block abortion access during the pandemic.
Essentially, they're putting forth a bunch of nonsense arguments and exploiting this pandemic in an effort to ban abortion. They are claiming that abortion is not an essential service and that they need to delay abortions because of the pandemic in order to free up hospital resources. And they're they're saying that they need to ban both procedural abortions and medication abortions, even though medication abortions don't actually use any personal protective equipment, PPE. So it's basically a bunch of completely nonsensical arguments that are very transparent. And it's obvious that their ultimate goal is to ban abortion and then likely use whatever regulations they're able to put in place now to carry over when this pandemic is over, if it's ever over. So it's a really cynical and disingenuous ploy to create a secondary public health crisis while we're in the middle of an existing public health crisis.
Yeah. And, I think for us, it seems obvious. And I outlined this on the outline as why this is all trash. So it seems clear to us that this is trash, but maybe talk about why this is trash.
Sure. So as Imani mentioned, states have issued these executive orders that are curtailing medical services generally. And in those executive orders, some states have specifically said that abortion is one of the medical services to be suspended through the duration. And the justification for doing that is that states are trying to conserve medical resources in a response to coronavirus outbreaks. And, they're trying to conserve resources like ventilators and PPE, personalized protective equipment. And we know that those are bad faith arguments because abortion as a medical procedure does not use up those kinds of resources. And as states have, as advocates have challenged those efforts, that evidence has come up to the forefront. And so thankfully that's been blocked. But it is, as Imani said, really creating a secondary public health crisis here. It's taking a bad faith argument and shoehorning it into a way to try and ban abortion, which these states have been looking for ways to do so throughout. I mean, I think it's no surprise, for example, that this is happening in places like Texas and Alabama and Ohio, where we have seen really aggressive efforts by conservative lawmakers to try and ban abortion under any circumstance. So here's just the latest one.
Yeah, and I think, it's really interacting with the existing law that they have. So whether that's a waiting period, so making people go back to a clinic twice to risk exposure more than once, or obviously you can only get an abortion during a specific set of time, especially if those states have, say a 20-week abortion ban, which a lot of these states do. So it's really interfering with time constraints that people are already operating under.
It really is. And honestly, if they are really that concerned about conserving medical resources, then they would deregulate abortion, right? They would repeal these ridiculous trap laws and these ridiculous biased consent laws that require these multiple trips to clinics and that require unnecessary forced ultrasounds and require doctors to have admitted. All of these things combine to create a reproductive healthcare crisis. And so the fact that they're not doing that they're actually trying to ban abortion is more indication that this is not about trying to conserve resources in response to COVID, but rather to curtail abortion. And what's particularly cynical, I think, is that they are sort of framing this as abortion providers wanting to retain special rights, right? So all of these different healthcare providers are being asked to sort of sacrifice part of their care, or patients are being asked to sacrifice some care that they require. And abortion providers are out here trying to continue their billion-dollar big abortion business by putting, the population at risk by refusing to stop doing abortions, performing abortions, so that these resources can be used elsewhere. And, that's just simply more of anti-choicers trying to frame abortion care as something other than healthcare, as something that is not within the realm of what is acceptable as healthcare. And it's nonsense. It's ridiculous. And, people are always going to try to control their own reproductive autonomy. People are going to get abortions. People are going to need abortions. And banning it in Texas, for example, has meant that people are now traveling out of state. So they're traveling to Colorado, where Jess lives, for example, 800 miles or more in order to get care. So it's not stopping abortion. It's just sort of pushing off or passing the abortion buck to another state, which is, it's a very cynical ploy. It's a ploy that makes no sense in terms of what they say they're trying to do. But if you look at it in terms of what they've been trying to do, as Jess said, it's ban abortion. And so if you look at it through that lens, it makes sense. But if you look at it through the lens they're trying to say is the lens they're looking through, which is, saving resources for a COVID response, that's not what the reality is.
Yeah, and if, people are having to travel 800 miles, it's also really impacting who can access abortion. Only people who can afford to travel like that are able to then access the care they need.
Absolutely. And we're seeing funds do things now that they have not had to, or not to the same degree, have had to historically. So, for example, abortion funds are providing a lot more in terms of practical support for patients right now, because in addition to navigating the restrictions that were already in place, now they are coming to places like Colorado. And so in addition to that expense, before there were volunteers who would let people stay with them while they were traveling for care. Now, because of social distancing requirements, that's not happening. And so abortion patients are finding themselves having to be put up in hotels. So there's a new layer of expense that even our existing systems of support are now having to adjust to. And this is all coming at a time, too, when folks are not able to fundraise on their own, right? So, I can't tell you the number of galas and events that go to creating, resources for abortion clinics and providers and patients that, because of COVID-19 and stay-at-home orders and social distancing requirements, have been canceled. And so the impact of this is one I think that we are going to feel within our community for months and years to come, potentially.
Okay, so that is what the states are saying. So what are the courts saying about all this?
Well, that's a good question, because honestly, Jess and I were just trying to figure out what it is the Fifth Circuit in particular is doing when it comes to Texas's executive orders. So it's most courts, the majority of courts have said that specifically with medication abortion, you can't ban medication abortion. A lot of courts have said that you can't ban medication abortion and you can't impose gestational bans if the ban would, or you can't impose these bans if the ban would push a person past the gestational limit where they can get an abortion in that particular state. So they're trying to carve out these sort of exceptions for people in a way to make it seem like, oh, well, we're still allowing people to get care. But then there are people who, as you said, it's expensive. They're low income people. So if you're pushing people back from getting an abortion at 9 or 10 weeks so they can get a medication abortion to getting an abortion at 13 or 14 weeks, even if they're not going to butt up against that deadline to where they won't be able to get an abortion at all, you're just pushing people into more and more expensive care, and also more dangerous abortion care, because as abortion, the later you are in a pregnancy, the more expensive the abortion is and the more risk there is for complications, irrespective of the fact that the overall complication rate is really low. You have states like Texas saying, well, yeah, we know that medication abortion may not use PPE, but what if there's a complication and that person has to be admitted to a hospital? They're really pulling from these truly outlier situations to make those outlier situations seem like they are the norm when they're not.
And also, just to tag on to what Imani has said, we are, this is, in many ways, this is a familiar space for abortion rights advocates, because we are in a landscape where we are peppered with federal court orders that are either granting abortion access or denying it. And the good news is, so far, all of the federal courts that have, with the exception of the Fifth Circuit, we'll just put an asterisk there, all of the federal courts that have looked at states' efforts to try and use COVID-19 as pretext to ban abortion have said that it's just that it's pretext. And so that includes rulings in Ohio, in Alabama. There's a settlement in place in Iowa. Let's see, where else? We're talking about Texas right now. They are moving fast and furious. Advocates have also filed lawsuits in Tennessee and Louisiana. There's another order blocking attempts in Arkansas. So far, there's 8 pieces of active litigation going on, with potentially a 9th one maybe coming down the pipes in Mississippi, which is all to say that part of this is, while the court's response has been good, having so much litigation around this topic right now is creating a lot of uncertainty. So people don't know, for example, if they can still get an abortion in Texas or if they can get an abortion in Alabama. And that alone has a chilling effect on rights and creates confusion around all of it. So even if the courts are doing their job and blocking these bans, which they have been, there is still damage that's done, not just, to folks who have to travel, but also to folks who simply don't know what their rights are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's been particularly true in Texas, where there was a while where there was a complete ban. And so people were having their appointments canceled.
Yeah, that's very much the case right now. I mean, so it is Friday. It's Friday, right?
Yes.
It's Friday when we're having
my computer says Friday.
And, as of right now, there are some abortions that people can, in theory, still access in Texas. But Texas is, as of this conversation right now, making an argument that no, in fact, it is still going to prohibit most procedures, including medication abortions. So this is a live fight, and one that even when the courts are doing their job, anti-choice lawmakers are, going right back to the drawing board and saying, well, we were thwarted in this effort. Let's see if we can, take another bite at the apple this way. And so it's going to be a fluid situation for a little while, I think.
Yeah, Texas just seems a little wild right now with multiple cases going to the Fifth Circuit.
Yeah, not only is it wild, we just found out today that Texas is going to be permitting elective surgeries again. But Governor Abbott has said that still doesn't include abortion. So now we're in a situation where just in the last week or two, they've been saying that abortion is non-essential and that it's elective. And now they're saying, okay, you can proceed with elective surgeries, but abortion isn't that. So if it's not elective, then it's essential. Like there's no middle ground. Is it some healthcare purgatory where it's both essential and not essential and elective and not elective, like Schrodinger's abortion? Like it's very strange, these arguments that they're making. And I'll be interested to see how they defend them in court. But maybe Jess can talk a little bit about the fact that basically the Fifth Circuit is just directing the Attorney General in how Texas should proceed in order to give the Fifth Circuit the opportunity to continue to ban abortion. And that's something I don't think we've seen before, Jess.
No, this is really, we talk about the federal courts going rogue with a bunch of Trump appointees, but wow, are we really seeing that to be the case in Texas? So without getting into too much of the legal weeds, there's been some really troubling developments from the judges there. So District Judge Lee Yackel issued a temporary restraining order on April 14th that said basically, some abortions can continue, but Texas can prohibit a few. And the Fifth Circuit said, okay, we're going to back off of that, of a previous issue or order that we had said that no abortions could take place. Well, after Yackel issued that April 14th order, the judges on the Fifth Circuit independently sent a letter to the attorneys and said, hey, we see something in Judge Yackel's order. We think it might be appealable. What do you think? Now, that is really weird. It's been a little while since I practiced law, but I have never in my career as an attorney and in the careers of attorneys that I know who still practice law have had an appellate court say, hey, we see this order. We think you might want to do something about it, right? That's not the judge's job. That is engaging in advocacy. So to long story short, Fifth Circuit, said, hey, do you think there's an appealable issue here? Texas said, you know what? We sure do. And lo and behold, here we are on Friday now, very likely waiting on a new order from the Fifth Circuit that will once again ban the few abortions that it had said could take place in the state. So it is, if you are looking on the calendar and picking a date, it is an open question whether or not the Fifth Circuit has an order in place banning abortion or not, as far as Texas is concerned. That is just how fluid the landscape is right now.
So do we think this is likely to work its way up to the Supreme Court?
I mean, it already has. Advocates for providers in Texas filed an emergency motion with the court last weekend, and then the Fifth Circuit basically said, "Just kidding," and permitted medication abortions to go forward. Advocates basically asked the Supreme Court to say, "Okay, wait a minute, medication abortions don't use PPE, so can we at least have medication abortion, please?"
Yeah.
And the Fifth Circuit was was an outlier with respect to those orders. All of the other appellate courts that have heard this issue have said, yeah, okay, medication abortion can go forward because this is absurd. So the Fifth Circuit blinked. Which makes it even more confusing that now they're going back and saying, no, actually, we do want to include medication abortion in the abortions that are banned, even though you just said 4 days prior that they weren't. So as Jess said, it's a live fight, and it's also a confusing fight, and really grounded in a lot of kind of civil procedure law that really nobody wants to talk about right now.
Which is why I always listen to Boom Lawyered and read your guys' pieces to figure out what is happening.
Well, and thank you for that. And just to tag on to what Imani has said too, and to follow up on the question of if this will go to the Supreme Court, really the nugget of the fight here is if states have the ability to declare a suspension of the right to abortion during a time of national crisis. In other words, is there some sort of national emergency exception to Roe versus Wade? Because that's what Texas is arguing for. They are saying that they have the power in responding to these, this unprecedented circumstance of the coronavirus pandemic to suspend certain constitutional rights, including the right to an abortion. And so this, that is a huge ask. That is a really big carve out to the right to abortion should the Fifth Circuit find one. And so that is an issue that we are really watching and are very concerned about as we're tracking this litigation.
Yeah, that seems really terrifying, as in if the Supreme Court were to decide that was true, it just seems like such a slippery slope and just opening this huge door to just banning abortion in general.
Absolutely, because if they're allowed to carve out a national emergency exception or a public healthcare crisis exception, then the question becomes, well, what counts as a national emergency? Mm-hmm. Are they going to now be able to claim that, for example, forcing people to live in a state where abortion is permitted is an infringement on their religious freedom, and that's a national emergency? There's really no limit to what Texas can argue is a national emergency, as long as you have a court like the Fifth Circuit that's willing to say, yeah, that's a national emergency. So you're right. It is a very, very slippery slope. And as Jess said, that's why we're watching this issue very carefully and pulling our hair out.
So, we've already kind of touched on this, but so right now, abortion is still legal in all 50 states, and you should probably be able to access it. With Texas, depending on what is happening at the exact time you're listening to this.
Mm-hmm. That's a correct statement.
That's terrifying, but...
It's terrifying that we have to say that almost every week. Yeah. You know what I mean? As we're discussing these bans and these restrictions, we're constantly forced to say it's still legal, because the way in which they're sort of waging this war, they're just creating chaos, right? They're creating a situation where people don't know what their rights necessarily are. And so they may not think that they're able to pursue a particular right because, it's changing. It's in flux so much. So yeah, it's a real humdinger.
So what does this mean going forward? And I know, Jess, you touched on a really interesting argument on Boom Lawyered that people should definitely go to listen to, that where you were worried about some of the things that were in the filings. Are there other things that you're seeing that are giving you concern for down the road?
Yeah. So this question about whether or not states can declare an emergency and use that to suspend abortion rights it makes me so sweaty. What we talked about on Boom Lawyered is that even in these orders that are blocking states' efforts to use COVID-19 to ban abortion, they are inadvertently creating some big carve-outs, and I can explain that. So in Texas, for example, when abortion has been allowed to continue, the order in place has said that medication abortion can continue, and those abortions that would time out under the state's 20-week ban, but that everything in between there is suspended. And so that is effectively a D&E ban, a ban on later abortion. Now, Texas is actively litigating a ban on D&E abortions. It had already tried under a separate piece of legislation to ban this procedure, and the lower court said, no, you can't do that. And the Fifth Circuit heard arguments on it and is sitting on a decision until the Supreme Court decides June medical services. So the Fifth Circuit right now doesn't even have to decide that issue because you can't get a D&E ban or a D&E abortion in Texas. And in other states that have similar orders in place, that is something that we are seeing. So I'm concerned that we will see advocates point to those suspensions and say, see, it's not really an undue burden to limit abortion to, only these particular circumstances. So that is something that is concerning. And of course, should the Fifth Circuit take Texas's mandamus request, so should they take the appeal up and give a ruling that says, yes, under certain circumstances, states can suspend abortion rights, as Imani said, there doesn't seem to be a limiting principle right now as to what those circumstances would be. And so we would be left, litigating that. And then there's the practical concern. We've got states like Louisiana that are trying to use COVID-19 to ban abortion, and they're already in active litigation trying to close clinics. If clinics close, one of the lessons that we have from the earlier fight in Texas and HB2 is that those clinics may not reopen. It is really hard to get those clinics to reopen. So there could be a long-term decimation of abortion access just from the uncertainty and the suspension and the sort of reanimation and the resuspension of abortion rights.
Okay, so that's a lot, and there's a lot happening. So what can listeners do? What actions can people take right now to fight back?
I mean, we're always going to say that you should try to donate to abortion funds, particularly now. I mean, it's so hard for people right now with the unemployment rate and people at home just kind of wondering what to do. But if you have a couple extra dollars, it's always a good idea to donate to abortion funds. And it's always a good idea, to just yell at people, yell at your representatives, live in Texas, just yell at Greg Abbott, yell at Ken Paxton, just point out how hypocritical it is for them to be claiming to reopen the state for elective surgery, but to continue to refuse to permit abortions to carry on. It's absurd. And also, frankly, yell at Ken Paxton for thinking he should be able to go to Colorado to his summer home while pregnant people in Texas can't get abortions. And Jess can tell you more about that because that's really something that's quite absurd and quite hypocritical.
Yeah, in the while all of this is going on here in Colorado, one of our counties had to issue a letter to, in response to Ken Paxton complaining that he couldn't come to his vacation home because we have stay-at-home orders in place. And he did a whole big to-do about how, unconstitutional and anti-democratic it was to prevent him from exercising his constitutional right to travel. And the man has no sense of irony. So here we are.
Okay, so since everybody is pretty stressed right now, and this was kind of a heavy episode, maybe we'll do a quick, what is giving you hope or giving you joy right now? It doesn't have to be work related. It can just be fun.
I have enjoyed sort of reconnecting with friends that I hadn't been connecting with and, over these Zoom chats and these hangouts. It just kind of made me wonder why I haven't been doing that all along.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I'm still an introvert. So I'm finding a lot of my extrovert friends just are like, let's hang out, let's text all the time. And I'm like, I'm still the same person. I don't need to be talking to you that much. So it's sort of a nice balance between people I've been able to reconnect with, but in a reasonable, small doses kind of way.
Oh my God, I so relate to that.
And I don't want to reward resilience as, sort of political strategy, but it has really been wonderful to see our community come together again in such an immediate and effective way to support providers and patients while all of this is going on. I mean, everything is so bananas, and these attacks in particular feel extra bad faith. And it's such a time when everybody's dealing with so much additional stress, right? People maybe have lost their jobs or are furloughed or they have health concerns. All of this is going on. And sincerely, the abortion rights community has rallied in new and really inspiring ways. And it makes me just really proud to be a part of the community. And so I am drawing hope and inspiration from that, because if we're able to do that kind of and come together in ways now when we're all physically isolated from one another, and when we have the pressures on our resources and our time that we do right now, that is a good thing.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Always a pleasure.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Feel free to reach out if you have topics you would like us to talk about, or if you just want to comment on the show. You can always reach me at Jenny@reprosfightback.com, or you can reach us on social media at reprosfightback or on Instagram at reprosfb. With that, I hope you take care and stay safe, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Okay, bye. For more information, including show notes from this episode and previous episodes, please visit us at our website at reprosfightback.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at reprosfightback, and on Instagram at reprosfb. If you like our show, please help others find it by sharing it with your friends, and please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.